U.S. forces assault Trindelano Fortress and cartel strikes back viciously. October 1st, 2025, 4 a.m., Catatumbo Plateau, Venezuela-Colombia border. Two B-2 Spirit bombers circle silently overhead as 195 U.S. Special Operations troops approach Fuerte La Guarida, a jungle fortress nestled in the Rocky Mountains. Inside, Venezuela's most notorious Trindelano drug lord, Don Mateo El Tren Valencia, is meeting with Colombia's ELN commander, Ejército de Liberación Nacional, Comandante Sombra, to seal a deal worth nearly $600 million, 10 tons of cocaine for $95 million in cash. The fortress is fraught with danger. 80 armed guards, trucks loaded with black duffel bags, AK-47s, PKM machine guns, and RPGs stacked against the walls. If the convoy made it through, the cartel could flood American cities with more than 50 million doses of cocaine, fueling violence and addiction for a generation. Then silence fell. Radios blared, rifles were cocked, and U.S. Special Forces prepared to strike. Can the cocaine empire weather the coming storm? Can U.S. Special Forces stop the trade before it poisons millions? And I'll tell you the truth. October 1st, 2025, 3:45 a.m., deep in the mist-shrouded valleys of Catatumbo, along Venezuela's northern border with Colombia. Behind it lies one of the Western Hemisphere's most dangerous criminal alliances. The Trindelano Cartel, notorious for its brutality inside Venezuela, has chosen this hour to meet face-to-face with guerrillas of the ELN, Ejército de Liberación Nacional, Colombia's most notorious drug trafficking network. The location is no coincidence, a hidden narco fortress known as Fuerte La Guarida, carved into the rock and shielded by the jungle canopy. For years, U.S. intelligence has been monitoring rumors of its existence. But tonight, the curtain is about to be lifted. The threat is terrifying. Parked inside the black SUVs and reinforced trucks were sealed packages, 10 tons of pure cocaine, enough to poison millions of lives. Opposite them were steel chests containing $95 million in cash. The new bills stacked in shrink-wrap towers. In total, the trade had a street value of nearly $600 million as it made its way to American cities. From the nightlife of Miami to the boulevards of Los Angeles. And if rerouted over time, analysts warn, the supply route could generate more than $2 billion in profits for the cartel in a single year. The numbers were not just shocking, they were catastrophic. At the center of it all was Don Mateo El Tren Valencia, the mysterious boss of the Trindelano, known for orchestrating massacres in the Venezuelan plains. Facing him was Commander Sombra, a battle-hardened ELN commander whose guerrillas controlled the smuggling corridors of northeastern Colombia. Both believed the night was theirs. Both were wrong. What neither knew was that overhead, U.S. satellites and MC-4C drones were transmitting every movement back to U.S. command posts. Special Forces units had been mobilized days in advance. And in the night sky, two B-2 Spirit bombers, nearly invisible to radar, hovered silently, awaiting orders. The scene was set. 40 cartel soldiers armed with AK-47s and RPGs stood guard around the warehouse. Inside, the jingle of counting money mingled with the clanking of weapons. Yet just behind the trees, 195 U.S. Special Forces soldiers lay in wait, rifles cocked, radios blaring. Every second of progress was a step closer to confrontation. 0 to 3:50 a.m. The convoy of SUVs and armored trucks moved deeper into the clearing, headlights shining through the crude walls of Fuerte La Guarida. Cartel commanders checked their watches. Nearly 40 ELN gunmen dismounted, rifles at the ready. Each carried a steel weapon, an AK-47 with an extended magazine, a PKM machine gun slung over his shoulder, and a vehicle-mounted RPG-7 grenade launcher. This was no simple exchange. It was a fortress on wheels. What none of them realized was that they were entering a black box, meticulously designed days in advance. For nearly a week, USMC-4C reconnaissance drones had mapped every road into the complex. Infrared sensors counted not only people, but also the precise heat signature of the cargo. 10 tons of cocaine sealed in 400 black duffel bags, each weighing nearly 50 pounds. The numbers painted a horrifying picture. A deal that could inject 50 million doses of opioids into the bloodstream of Americans. From a forward command post just 12 kilometers south, American officers whispered over encrypted radios. The plan was brutal but simple. Surround, attack, and suffocate. On the ground, 195 Special Forces soldiers moved like shadows through the trees, divided into 4 teams. 2 sniper units crawled up the slope overlooking the clearing, their sights glowing red. And medics prepared 60 first aid kits, ready for the casualties they knew would come. Above them, the sky was alive. An MC-4C Sentinel drone painted laser markers on each truck. Much higher, 2 B-2 Spirit bombers circled silently at 28,000 feet, carrying precision weapons capable of leveling entire blocks in seconds. For the gangs in ELN below, the night seemed normal. For the American commanders, it was the calm before the storm. 3:59 a.m. The chatter inside the compound grew louder. Wads of cash were counted, duffel bags were unzipped for inspection. Fingers tightened on the triggers, the air between the 2 criminal empires thick with suspicion. And just beyond the trees, American rifles were pointed. 4:05 a.m. a single word rang out through the headset. Execution. Would the raid shatter this gang fortress before dawn? Or would 50 million doses of cocaine flood unchecked into American cities? Will the raid shatter this cartel fortress before dawn? Or will 50 million doses of cocaine flood into American cities unchecked? 4:05 a.m. the valley exploded. From the tree line, 195 U.S. Special Forces surged forward in unison, rifles cracking with disciplined bursts. The first seconds were thunder. 1,200 rounds fired in under a minute, each one aimed to shock and overwhelm. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning. Cartel guards reeled in panic. 5 men went down instantly, caught before they could even raise their weapons. Others scrambled for cover, diving behind SUVs stacked with cocaine and money. The ELN fighters were quicker. They unleashed a savage reply. Hundreds of AK-47 rounds ripping through the night, PKM machine guns hammering with belts of ammunition. RPG-7 rockets hissed into the air, detonating in brutal fireballs along the tree line. For an instant, the battlefield was chaos incarnate. Smoke curled above burning vehicles. Tracer rounds stitched across the compound, and the sound was deafening. A storm of steel. Yet the Americans pressed forward with precision. Grenadiers fired M203 launchers, scattering defenders who clustered behind barricades. 2 Javelin missiles whooshed out, smashing into the trucks that carried the cocaine. The explosions ignited black duffels, sending fire and white powder pluming skyward. The cost of battle was real. 3 U.S. operators were hit, their shoulders torn by shrapnel and rifle fire. Medics rushed forward under cover of suppressing fire, dragging them back to safety. But for every American wounded, the cartel bled tenfold. Within the first 10 minutes, a dozen cartel and ELN fighters lay dead or incapacitated. Another 20 stumbled bleeding, their weapons clattering onto the dirt. Still, resistance was fierce. Gunmen fought from every angle, crouching behind tires, windows, shattered crates. But the Americans had come prepared. Sniper fire from the ridgeline cut down anyone who dared to expose themselves. Close assault teams stormed through alleys of twisted metal, zip-tying those who surrendered. By 4:15, the compound was half consumed by fire, its defenders staggering, confused, desperate. The message was undeniable. The cartel's fortress was cracking under the weight of precision and overwhelming force. What minutes earlier had been an empire of guns, drugs, and cash, was now a battlefield of smoke and broken bodies. Yet the night was not finished. Higher above, the silent wings of 2 B-2 bombers still circled, waiting for the order that would erase what remained of Fuerte La Guarida forever. You think the battle is finished? Stay with us. What happens next will leave you stunned. 4:20 a.m. The gunfire below began to taper, but the battle was far from finished. While special forces pressed deeper into the burning compound, overhead, two black silhouettes glided silently across the stratosphere. The B-2 Spirit bombers, America's $2.1 billion war machines, had been circling at 28,000 feet, unseen, unheard, waiting for the command. Now it came. Release ordnance. Bomb bay doors opened with mechanical precision. Inside rested two 2,000-pound JDAMs, each capable of leveling a city block. Their target? The hardened warehouses at the heart of Fuerte La Guarida, where cartel chemists had processed narcotics for years. Intelligence estimated that inside those bunkers lay 10 tons of cocaine, industrial mixers, steel vats, and enough precursor chemicals to manufacture another 30 tons within weeks. If untouched, this single stronghold could flood the U.S. with over 100 million individual doses. That future ended in seconds. 4:23 a.m. The valley sky cracked. Both bombs sliced downward like meteors, invisible until the final moments. A roar followed. Twin detonations that shook the mountain ridge. Concrete bunkers disintegrated instantly, walls folding like paper. Shock waves tore through the compound, flipping trucks onto their sides. The ground itself trembled as fireballs rolled upward, turning night into day. The effect was apocalyptic. Hundreds of duffel bags of cocaine erupted into white plumes, carried skyward in clouds of dust and flame. Stacks of cash, nearly $95 million in cartel money, ignited, bursting into blackened ash that scattered into the wind. Cartel survivors, stunned and terrified, collapsed to their knees as their empire vanished before their eyes. From the ridge, U.S. soldiers stared as the stronghold they had stalked for months ceased to exist in less than a minute. The operation was precise, yet devastating. The blast radius confined to the compound, sparing villages nearby. Still, the valley carried the sound of liberation. By 4:30 a.m., the once invincible base was nothing but smoldering craters and twisted steel. For Trindiliano and their ELN partners, the illusion of power was gone. For U.S. commanders, the message was clear. No fortress, no cartel, no insurgent alliance was beyond reach. And for the men on the ground, it was only the beginning. The survivors still had to be hunted, bound, and brought to justice. 4:45 a.m. The battlefield was silent at last. Where once stood the pride of the Trindiliano cartel, only smoke and scorched ruins remained. U.S. Special Forces moved through the wreckage methodically. Flashlights cutting across shattered walls and collapsed bunkers. Every figure was checked. Every survivor restrained. By the end of the sweep, the numbers spoke louder than the gunfire. 12 cartel and ELN fighters lay dead, their weapons scattered across the dirt. Another 20 were pulled out wounded, treated on site before being zip-tied and flown out under heavy guard. Most shocking of all, 12 high-value operatives were captured alive, including lieutenants tied directly to massacres across Venezuela and Colombia. Among them was Don Mateo El Tren Valencia, the elusive boss who had ruled the plains with blood and cocaine. His surrender was more than a tactical win. It was the collapse of a shadow empire. The seizures were staggering. U.S. teams cataloged the destruction. 10 metric tons of cocaine neutralized, worth nearly $600 million on American streets. $95 million in cash incinerated before it could finance bribes, weapons or more production. Analysts estimated the combined loss in destroyed product, cash and future revenue at nearly $2 billion. For a cartel that had thrived on brutality and greed, the financial hemorrhage was crippling. American casualties were not ignored. 3 U.S. operators wounded stood as solemn reminders of the price paid. Their injuries tended even as victory was declared. Yet their sacrifice had ensured that millions of potential doses would never reach the veins and streets of American cities. One medic whispered what many thought. Better our blood here than their poison back home. By 5 a.m., helicopters thundered overhead, carrying prisoners, evidence, and wounded soldiers to secure facilities. Behind them, the blackened crater of Fuerte La Guarida smoldered like a grave marker, a symbol etched into the mountains. No cartel stronghold was beyond reach. For the people of Catatumbo, long trapped under the shadow of narco violence, the blasts were more than explosions. They were the sound of release, the sound of liberation. And for Americans watching thousands of miles away, the lesson was undeniable. When left unchecked, a single deal between cartels and guerrillas could poison millions. But when confronted with resolve, even the mightiest criminal empires fall in a single night. By dawn on October 1, 2025, the mountains of Catatumbo bore witness to history. What began as a secret transaction between two of the hemisphere's most feared criminal networks, Triniliano and the ELN, ended in fire, smoke, and total collapse. In less than 2 hours, a fortress that once churned out poison for the world was erased from the map. The numbers remain staggering. 10 tons of cocaine, enough for 50 million doses, never reached American streets. $95 million in hard cash, intended to fuel bribes and weapons, burned into ash before it could corrupt another official. And the blow to cartel revenue, nearly $2 billion in projected profit wiped out in a single night, marked not just a setback, but a collapse. Their empire was reduced to rubble. Their leaders shackled. Their reputation shattered. For U.S. forces, the price was real. 3 Special Forces operators wounded, carried out on stretchers, were reminders of the risk borne by those who fight in the shadows. Yet their sacrifice ensured that countless families in the United States would never feel the sting of drugs destined for their communities. It was a victory not just for America's military, but for every parent, every neighborhood, every life spared. And for the people of Venezuela and Colombia, long terrorized by cartel violence, the echoes of the B-2 strikes carried a different meaning. The sound of liberation. The proof that even the strongest criminal fortresses can fall. The lesson is clear. No matter how remote, how fortified, or how ruthless, no cartel is beyond reach. But the fight is not over. If you believe operations like this matter, to protect American lives, to dismantle empires of blood and drugs, then share this story, subscribe, and stay with us. Because battles like these are fought in silence, and it is our duty to bring them into the light. If you found this story powerful, please subscribe and share it. Your support helps us bring more untold battles to light.